Welcome back to Book Talk. Today we'll be talking about The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. I'd never heard of this book or the author when I picked it up at a yard sale. It just sounded intriguing. But it's apparently a classic and gained worldwide acclaim after its publication in 1927. On Friday noon, July the 20th, 1714, the finest bridge in all Peru broke and precipitated 5 travelers into the gulf below. This is the first sentence in The Bridge of San Luis Rey, and it serves to immediately launch us into the story. The bridge collapse is witnessed by a passing monk, Brother Juniper. Getting all existential and wondering why this happened to these particular people, Brother Juniper decides to find out everything he can about them, and, more importantly, what led them to cross the bridge in the first place. He wanted to prove empirically that the bridge collapse had been an act of God. I give this book 5 stars. It's very quick and easy to read, but it's so meaningful in its simplicity, and it'll stick with you long after you've finished reading. I feel like mentioning, though there are religious aspects, this is not a religious book, and you can enjoy it no matter what you believe. Because this book isn't about religion, it's about love. We all love people in different ways. There's no one right way to love someone. And Wilder beautifully portrays this in The Bridge of San Luis Rey. As I said in the synopsis, we are immediately made aware of the tragic event that took the lives of 5 people. The well-trafficked Bridge of San Luis Rey had been woven more than a century before the start of the book by the Incas, and though it was made of thin slats and dried vines, everyone thought it would last forever. The news of the bridge breaking had shocked and dismayed many Peruvians because any one of them could have gone down with the bridge. None of them seemed to care about the 5 people that did die. They could only imagine themselves crossing the bridge when it fell. We are soon introduced to Brother Juniper, a Franciscan monk from northern Italy who is in Peru on a mission trip to convert the natives. He is on his way to cross the bridge himself when he witnesses the fall. And where most people would have secretly been joyous at having missed the tragic event by mere minutes, Brother Juniper simply wondered, why did this happen to those 5? He spends 6 years interviewing everyone who knew the 5 victims and puts it all into an enormous book to show that the entirety of a person's life is all a part of God's plan for them. The first victim that we're introduced to is an elderly woman named Doña Maria, the Marquesa de Montemayor. Though she was the daughter of a wealthy cloth merchant, the Marquesa was a very unhappy child. She was ugly, and she stuttered, and she felt completely alone. As she grows into a young woman, many suitors start presenting themselves, obviously attracted to her father's money. The Marquesa wished to remain single and fought with every fiber of her being to do so until the age of 26, when she was finally married off to a nobleman. Even though she was married, the Marquesa still felt alone, so when she gives birth to a beautiful daughter, she practically worships her. She probably hadn't loved anyone before. But little Clara took after her father, and by the age of 8 started snubbing her mother's affections. Despite Clara's obvious repulsion to her mother, the Marquesa continued to love her in a way that's described as fatiguing. You know the kind. When you wish the person would love you a little less because their love is draining all your energy. Usually that kind of love is what a child has for their parents or a family member, not the other way around. But it serves as a way to show us how starved for love this woman is, that she's pushing her daughter away because of it. Doña Clara received many offers of marriage when she got older, and purposefully chose the one that required her to move to Spain, a country that takes 6 months for a letter from Peru to arrive. The Marquesa became a bit eccentric after her daughter's departure. She stopped caring about her appearance and even started talking to herself out loud. She had been denounced 3 times by the Inquisition, and surely would have been burned if it weren't for her son-in-law's status. About 4 years after Clara left Peru, she invites her mother to come visit her in Spain. The trip does not go well. Even though they've been apart for 4 years, the two can't seem to get along. The Marquesa can't help but be overly affectionate, and Clara can't help getting annoyed. Not wanting their relationship to suffer, the Marquesa wakes up before dawn one day, kisses the door of her daughter's bedroom, and takes a ship back to South America. The Marquesa still desires her daughter's affection, so she starts writing letters to her. She pours her heart into the letters as she writes and rewrites them to perfection. In fact, her letters are so astonishingly beautiful that they become monuments of Spanish literature for centuries after her death. Unfortunately, we're told that Clara barely glances at the letters, and it's her husband that has them immortalized. Upon her return to Peru, the Marquesa goes to the orphanage run by the convent of Santa Maria Rosa de las Rosas, and I'm saying that wrong probably, to seek out a young companion, which came in the form of a 14-year-old girl named Pepita. For the first 2 years, Pepita would visit the Marquesa on the occasional afternoon, but eventually moved into the palace where Doña Maria lived. Though this might sound like a dream come true, it was far from it. Pepita was lonely living with the Marquesa. She was hated by the servants that took advantage of the Marquesa's indisposition because she refused to do the same, and the Marquesa herself would often forget Pepita's presence and leave her in town waiting on a street corner all day for a woman that had already gone home. When the Marquesa would become aware of Pepita's presence, she was cordial and humorous, and they would talk for hours. But the next day, the Marquesa would retreat into herself, and though she was never rude to Pepita, she would distance herself. One day in the springtime, a letter arrives that contains knowledge that would greatly change the course of the lives of the Marquesa and young Pepita. The Marquesa's daughter Clara is pregnant and is due to give birth in October. Clara seems unaffected by her pregnancy in the letter. She makes it sound like an inconvenience because she has to cancel her plans to visit France in the fall. She doesn't even say she's pregnant. She just says she can't go to Provence anymore because her child will be born in October. Like, way to bury the lead. But the Marquesa goes absolutely nuts about it. She starts following every superstition to ensure her daughter a safe and happy delivery. There were no knots permitted in the house. The maids weren't allowed to tie their hair up, and if anyone used an even step on the stairs, they were driven from the house. Then, apparently there is a Peruvian rite whenever a baby is expected, where you make a pilgrimage to the shrine of Santa Maria do Cuxambuqua. They travel safely across the bridge of San Luis Rey and up into the hills to the town of Cuxambuqua. The Marquesa drops Pepita off at the inn so she can arrange their stay while she continues up to the church to pray. While Doña Maria is in the church, Pepita finishes all the preparations and decides to write a letter to the abbess that ran the orphanage, Madre Maria del Pilar. She writes about how she's mistreated by the maids and that she misses the abbess and wishes to go back to the orphanage if she's able. She writes about her loneliness and how she has no one to talk to. Pepita leaves the letter on the table when she goes to check on the supper. The Marquesa comes back and finds the letter. She reads a small section of it and becomes envious of the nun. She had been trying for decades to get her daughter to love her the way Pepita loves the abbess, but hadn't been successful. When Pepita returns, Doña Maria asks her about the letter. Pepita admits that she doesn't want to send the letter anymore. She says it's a bad letter because it isn't brave. Then she went into her room and tore the letter up. Her words opened Doña Maria's eyes. She had never thought to use courage in life or love, so she stays up all night and writes her first courageous letter to her daughter. 2 days later, they start their journey back to Lima. While they're crossing the bridge, it collapses. The next victim we meet is a young man named Esteban. Esteban and his twin brother Manuel were left at the door of the convent of Santa Maria Rosa de las Rosas in a basket. They were raised by the abbess of the convent, just like Pepita. Madre Maria del Pilar had grown to despise all men, but she developed a fondness for Esteban and Manuel. They grew up around the convent until they reached the age where they became a distraction for the sisters. Though they left the convent, they still helped around the churches in the area. They quickly realized that the clerical life wasn't for them and decided to become scribes. Esteban and Manuel were very close, as most twins are, so close that as soon as they were learning to speak, they invented their own secret language. They have a love that only twins can know. A little fun fact here, kind of. Thornton Wilder had a twin that was unfortunately stillborn. There's a part of me that wonders if he wrote this part for him. I don't have a twin or anything, though people think my sister and I are twins, but I wonder if your twin was stillborn. Would you still feel that closeness with them even though they're gone? Food for thought. Esteban and Manuel did everything together. When they both got tired of writing, they found new jobs together. They had like 6 different jobs over the years, and they did them all together. There was only one thing that could break up the brothers, and that was the love of a woman. They moved back to Lima and got a job copying down parts for the theater, and Manuel became enamored with Camila Pericol, the star of the theater. I should mention this isn't our first time meeting the Pericol. The Marquesa goes to a show at the theater one night, but it wasn't really important to her story, so I didn't add it to the summary. All you need to know about the Pericol is she's a bitch. She's rich, she's beautiful, and she's a famous actress in Lima. All of those together have given her a sense of entitlement and holier-than-thou attitude. She treats people like crap, including the Marquesa, because she can. So she calls Manuel into her dressing room one day. She doesn't actually ask for him, because no one can tell them apart. She just asks for one of them, and then asks which one he is. The Pericol asks him to write letters to her lover, the Viceroy, and another man later revealed to be a matador. Usually her Uncle Pio wrote all her letters, but these were very personal and she didn't want him knowing about it. Manuel kept his promise to not mention his work to anyone, including Esteban. Esteban knew his brother was pining after the Pericol, but never guessed they had even spoken until she shows up in the middle of the night 2 months later. She was stood up by her matador, and apparently needed a letter so urgently that she came straight from their meeting point. After the Pericol leaves, Esteban tells Manuel that he should follow her. I think he does this because he thinks he's holding his brother back from pursuing true love. But Manuel thinks it's Esteban trying to make him choose between them in his misery. He doesn't understand why he would do that, but he does understand his misery, and he sacrifices everything to it by completely removing the Pericol from his heart. Then he swears to Esteban that he will never write another letter for her again. They have a little spat because Esteban thinks he's doing it because of him, which he is, but Manuel convinces him that it's because he really has no chance with her, which is possible. Then one night, Manuel cuts his knee on a piece of metal. They'd never really been sick before, so when the leg started to swell, they had no idea what to do, and Manuel was in great pain. He remembers one night that he saw a sign for a barber shop that claimed the owner was both a barber and a surgeon. The barber arrives the next morning and prescribes some ointments and drafts. He also instructs Esteban to lay cold cloths on Manuel's leg every hour. The pain only seemed to get worse, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, Manuel started cursing his brother for standing in the way of his love. He wasn't in his right mind, though. He was overcome with pain and exhaustion and didn't know what he was saying. Literally. When he calms down and starts to feel better, he has no recollection of ever saying anything bad about his brother. 3 nights after the barber came, Manuel dies. Esteban can't stand to look at his brother's dead body and leaves the building. The innkeeper calls for the abbess to take care of the body. She finds Esteban on the street corner and asks him to help her with his brother, but he won't. He can't. The abbess asks which brother he is, and Esteban says he's Manuel. I'm not quite sure why he says this. Maybe it's to keep a part of his brother alive? Whatever it is, it doesn't really make much difference in the story. Either way, everyone's interest is piqued by the death of one twin, the separation of the brothers. They all gossip about Esteban and his strange way of dealing with his grief. The abbess, who had been praying for him to no avail, decides to send for Captain Alvarado, a strange and noble figure in Peru at the time. He arrives in Lima 3 weeks later. They have a 10-minute chat, and then he heads straight for Cuzco, where Esteban is supposedly working for the university. Captain Alvarado had a passing acquaintance with the twins from back when they worked on the docks, and Esteban had a great respect for him. The captain tells Esteban that he's looking for some strong men to come on his next voyage, far from Peru. Esteban agrees to go. Then Captain Alvarado says he wants his brother to come as well. Obviously, he spoke with the abbess, so he knew that Manuel was dead. I think he only says this so Esteban won't suspect that he was only there as a favor to the abbess. Esteban tells him that his brother is dead and tells the captain that he's Esteban. So there's really no point in saying he was Manuel earlier. I don't think, anyway. Captain Alvarado tells Esteban to meet him for dinner and they'll discuss the details of the voyage. The only thing they seemed to talk about was going back to Lima the next morning, before they got completely soused. Esteban starts saying some concerning things while drunk. Captain Alvarado mentions him running into a burning building to pull someone out, and Esteban starts talking about how you're not allowed to kill yourself. If you run into a burning building to save someone and you die, it's not killing yourself. Then he says that he wants the captain to give him all his wages in advance, so he can buy a nice present for Madre Maria del Pilar, and he agrees. The next morning, when they're set to leave for Lima, Esteban tells Captain Alvarado that he's changed his mind and won't be going. The captain reminds him of the present he wanted to get the abbess, and Esteban reluctantly agrees to go again. He goes back up to his room to get his things while Captain Alvarado waits for him. After a while, he decides to go check on Esteban. At the door, he can hear a familiar sound. The sound of a rope being adjusted on a beam. For a moment, he thinks maybe he should leave Esteban alone. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe this is the only outcome for him. But at the next sound that came from the room, he flew inside and caught Esteban. I mean, wouldn't you? Not all of us are as heartless as Walter White, letting someone die when we have the ability to save them. Not that it matters much in this case. We don't even get to know what Esteban was thinking after. When they get to the bridge of San Luis Rey, Captain Alvarado goes down to the stream below to supervise the passage of some merchandise, while Esteban crosses the bridge and fell with it. I can't help but wonder what his life at sea would be like. Would he try to kill himself again and succeed? Was he really meant to die? Or would he finally be able to move on from his brother's death and finally live life to the fullest? I guess those questions are kind of pointless, but I'm still curious. One of the last victims we meet is Uncle Pio, who I mentioned earlier. He is the valet to Camilla Pericle, as well as her singing master, her coiffeur, her master, her reader, her errand boy, her banker, and rumor had it, her father. Uncle Pio was born the bastard son of a Castilian aristocrat. At the age of 10, he ran away to Madrid and was not looked for. From then on, he became a little shyster. Though most of his endeavors were technically not illegal, some of them definitely towed the line. But as someone who preferred not to be tied down, especially in prison, he stayed away from things like thievery. Around the age of 20, Uncle Pio realizes that he has only 3 real aims in life: to be independent, to always be near beautiful women, and to be near people that love the masterpieces of Spanish literature, particularly in the theater. When he's around 30, Uncle Pio's life becomes too complicated after an argument in a brothel, and he moves to Peru. I'm not sure what the argument could have been about, but it apparently was bad enough for him to cross an ocean to get away from. Within 4 months, he practically knew everyone in Lima and catches the attention of the Viceroy and becomes one of his confidential servants. He had many ventures in Peru, but none of them earned him much money, until one day he discovers a 12-year-old girl named Michaela Villegas singing in a cafe. He sees this awkward little girl and gets it into his head to play Pygmalion. And if you don't know who Pygmalion is, he's a king from Greek mythology. He makes a female figure out of ivory that's later brought to life by Aphrodite. So, Uncle Pio is going to sculpt Michaela Villegas into a wonderful singer. He ends up buying her, because I guess she was a slave. It doesn't really say, but it mentions that she was happy not to be whipped and given hot soup. So either that or her parents hated her. Uncle Pio gave Michaela a bed in his house and wrote songs for her, bought her a new dress, and gave her many lessons in music and acting. And little Michaela ate up everything he threw at her. Over the years, she grows into the beautiful and talented Camilla Pericle, the greatest actress in Lima. After so many years of success, the Pericle becomes bored of the stage. The only thing that seems to take away her boredom is whenever a new actress arrives to the theater, but that never lasts long. Eventually, she becomes the mistress of the elderly Viceroy of Peru. It's funny because I recently looked up Pericol to see what its meaning was and discovered an opera called La Pericol, which is about a poor Peruvian singer called La Pericol, who is being pursued romantically by the Viceroy of Peru, Don Andreas de Ribera. Then I found out that Michaela Villegas was a real Peruvian entertainer that went by the name La Pericoli, and was the mistress of the Viceroy, though he doesn't share a name with the character in the book and opera. The story goes that when the Viceroy asked La Pericoli to become his mistress, she said that she would when he laid the moon at her feet. So, he ordered the construction of the Paseo de Aguas in front of her house. It's an aqueduct with a long reflecting pool. The night of the following full moon, he invited La Pericoli to see the moon at her feet. Can you believe that? The power of boners, my God. I thought that was interesting, so I wanted to share it. Back to the book. The Pericol and the Viceroy were together for years, and she bore him 3 children. Of course, she got bored of him and started having affairs with matadors and such. But she gets it into her mind that she wants to become a lady. She leaves the stage at the age of 30, and in 5 years, she's able to acquire a place in society. Uncle Pio goes to visit the Pericol in her villa, trying to convince her to come back to the stage, though she won't. Though she refuses to go back to his world, Michaela still loves Uncle Pio for raising her and giving her a wonderful life. Then, a smallpox epidemic sweeps through Lima. Michaela catches it and is unfortunately disfigured. She quits the city completely and moves out to her villa in the hills. Uncle Pio stays by her side through it all, wanting to help with her children and around the house. One night, he pushes open a door that was supposed to be locked and sees Michaela trying to cover up the pock marks on her face to no avail. She is ashamed at being seen in such a state and tells Uncle Pio that she never wants to see him again. He leaves, but not for long. He comes back and asks that she let him take her son, Jaime, for a year and teach him the way he taught her. Michaela denies his request, of course, but after some convincing, she agrees to let Jaime decide. Jaime, a small boy of 7 who was prone to epilepsy like his father, met Uncle Pio at the inn the next day. They set out on a cart to Lima, but when Uncle Pio realized the jostling was no good for Jaime, he carried him on his shoulders. He said they would stop and rest once they reached the other side of the bridge. Brother Juniper compiles all of this and more into a huge book. The book was judged heretical and ordered to be burned in the square along with its author. I don't think he deserved to die, but I do think his idea was a bit misguided. After we read about Brother Juniper's death, we are taken back to the day of the funeral service for the 5 people that died in the bridge collapse. Everyone we met in the book is there. The Viceroy is there for his son, Captain Alvarado is there for Esteban, the abbess is there with the rest of the nuns in the convent. She was feeling disheartened, and without Pepita, she felt that her work to help the sick and the poor would die with her. Michaela had made her way from the villa to the church for the funeral, but couldn't bring herself to finish her journey. She was mad at herself for not being able to tell Uncle Pio that she loved him, or to encourage Jaime in his suffering. She felt that she had failed them and didn't know how to forgive herself. Michaela spent a year in this mood of self-despair, until she heard that the abbess had also lost 2 people she loved in the accident, and decides to seek her out. She wants to know how she's supposed to go on. The abbess has Michaela tell her everything from her life, to lay all of her despair at her feet. It's later revealed that Michaela becomes a helper at the convent. Sometime after Michaela's visit with the abbess, she gets another visitor from Spain. Clara is there to speak about her mother, the Marquesa de Montemayor. She shows the abbess the last letter her mother sent her, and it fills her with a happiness that only a child can feel. She asks Clara if she would like to see her work, how she is caring for the old and the young, the sick and the blind, the deaf and the dumb. The 3 women meet and talk for hours, and while they're talking, the abbess can't help but think, even now, almost no one remembers Esteban and Pepita but myself. Camilla alone remembers her Uncle Pio and her son, this woman her mother. But soon we shall die, and all memory of those 5 will have left the earth, and we ourselves shall be loved for a while and forgotten. But the love will have been enough. All those impulses of love return to the love that made them. Even memory is not necessary for love. There is a land of the living and a land of the dead, and the bridge is love, the only survival, the only meaning. Wasn't this beautiful? Such an amazing story with an amazing message. So be sure to tell your family how much you love them tonight, and give them a big ol' hug. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did, and I'll see you next time, here on Book Talk.